William, we need to get this show on the road, my love. Does anybody know if we have to stand up here because of a live stream? Do we have to stand up here because of the live stream?
You have to stand wherever you want. Those are the rules. It's usually the second row here is where the referendum stands.
But can they?
They can see it there, you can see what we do.
Okay. You know what, though? I'm going to stand here so I can lean on the podium. All right, so.
The rules are you have to stand wherever you want.
So did you guys all introduce yourself to Larry and Lisa?
No.
Okay, could we do that, please?
I'm Tamar.
Your name is? Okay. And we're Sue and Bill. And we are filling in as best we can for Rabbi Cohen. And what is the verdict? Are we getting out the Torah?
We're waiting. We're hoping Elijah comes or something.
I think probably not. Who's got a Mazel Tov moment?
I guess we're out.
Tamar.
I just got back from Rome.
Oh, that's right. How was it?
It was nice. Somebody asked me if I was excited. I said, no, it just feels like home. 3 times somebody said, where did you learn English so well?
Oh, we'll take it. Yes.
Well, I had been having an existential crisis for a number of years. So going back and letting it flow felt really good.
Wonderful. Welcome home. That's right. That's right. Mazel Tov. And they have a son who made Aliyah and got married.
We got to spend all 8 nights, or I did, all 8 nights of Hanukkah in Jerusalem.
Oh, wow. Is that where he lives, Jerusalem?
Over to
That is so cool. Anybody else? All right. Okay, so are we doing this or are we not doing this? Okay, so we will do the prayers that don't require a minyan, except unless somebody needs to say Kaddish. No? Okay. Oh, get the big print, would you? And thank you to whoever lit the candles. Thank you, David. Lisa, would you enjoy doing the blessing? Would you like to? Yeah, you.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu b'chavik ner shel Shabbat.
Amen.
Amen.
Hello.
Thank you so much.
Shabbat shalom.
All right, let's turn to page 11, not page L'chunaranana, page 11. And we'll sing L'chunaranana. L'chunaranana l'Adonai, l'Ariah l'Tzur Yisheinu, Nikat mafana pitoda, bezimat neri alo. And then Psalm 98, which I believe is the Psalm of the Day, page 17 and 18 and 14. Anybody know what this is?
Well, 14, then 17, and 18.
Oh, okay.
We've done this before.
We have? Oh, okay. 14, then 17 and 18. It's been a while.
14.
You can't. Bow to Adonai in the glory of this holy place. Tremble before God's presence, all who dwell on earth. Announce among the nations, Adonai reigns. The land is firm and will not be moved. Peoples will be truthfully judged.
The heavens shall be glad, and the earth rejoice. The sea and its fullness roar. The meadows and all that grows in them exult. Even the trees of the forest shall sing praise. Adonai comes to judge the earth, judging lands with righteousness and peoples with divine truth.
And then 17 and 18. Let's read this together. Sing to Adonai a new song, for Adonai has wrought wonders. God's right hand and holy arm have brought deliverance. Adonai declared deliverance. As nations looked on, God's righteousness was revealed. God dealt faithfully and kindly with the house of Israel. The very ends of the earth saw our God's saving power. Call out to Adonai, all the earth. Break out in joyful singing. Sing to Adonai to the music of the lyre, lyre and voices making music together with horns and shofar cries. Trumpet the presence of the sovereign Adonai. Let the sea and all that is in it roar, the earth and all who inhabit it thunder. Let rivers clap hands, while mountains sing in harmony, greeting Adonai, who comes to judge the earth, judging the world with justice and the nations with truth. Let's do Mismoila David on page 21. Page 21, Mismoila David. You should announce the page numbers are closer.
Oh, is that me? Okay, why don't you?
Mismoila David, Avu Adonai b'nei Elim, Avu Adonai kavod ba'oz, Avu Adonai kavod shemo, Ishtakavu Adonai be'adrat kodesh, Kol Adonai amayim, Kavod Hirim Adonai Amayim Rabim Kol Adonai B'koach Kol Adonai B'hadar Kol Adonai Shover Arazim V'yashaber Adonai et arzei havanon V'yakidesh kemo egel Lachanon V'yiron kemo ben Ve'amim Kol Adonai Chotzei Lavodesh Kol Adonai Echil Midbar Echil Adonai Midbar Kodesh Kol Adonai B'chol Ayalot V'yachesef He'arod U'v'ho Kulo Omer Adonai Lamavu Yashav Vayeshev Adonai Melech Haolam Adonai Oz Ve'amo Yitain Adonai Marech et Amo V'Shalom. Nechadoti is on page 23. We'll do the first two verses and the last verse when we'll turn toward the door. And who's to get the door, David? First two and the last one. So page 23 and page 25.
Shabbat, Lecha Dodi, Likrat Kala, Pnei Shabbat, Shamor v'Zachor, B'dibur Echad, Ishmi'anu Echamucha, Adonai Echad, U'Shemo Echad, Shemu Tiferet V'Litila, Lecha Dodi, Likrat Kala, Pnei Shabbat, Likrat Shabbat, Lechu V'Necha, Ki Mekor HaBracha, Merosh Mikedem Nesucha, Sof Ma'aseh Machshava Techila, Lecha Dodi, Likrat Kala, Pnei Shabbat, Lekabela.
Thank you. And we rise and face the door. Go ahead. Bohi v'shalom, ateret bala, gam b'simcha v'tzala, toch emunei am segula, boi chala, lecha dodi, likrat kala, pnei Shabbat, lekabla. Please be seated. And we'll turn to page 28. At the red triangle and sing Tzadik Katamar. That's your song. Tzadik Katamar Yivrach Ke'eres Bavanon Yizkar Shetulim B'Beit Adonai V'chasvut Eloheinu Yafrichu Odim Yilvun B'Seva Tishenim V'Rananim Yehu V'Hagi Ki Yashar Adonai Tzuri Tzuri V'lo Avalat Rabo. You're next. Josh. Yeah.
Yes, since I'm a professor, I always say, I'm going to lecture for 50 minutes and then there'll be a test. But, it'll be an easy test, and then you can argue for an A, whether you need to or not. So the Torah portion for this week is Vayigash, and I just want to talk about the Parsha and a little bit of commentary based on just some research I've been doing over the course of yesterday and today. We are getting very close to the end of the book of Genesis. In fact, we'll close the end of the book of Genesis, or complete the book of Genesis next week, along with the secular year, and begin Exodus the following week after that. And so this week and next week is the conclusion of the Joseph story, which is one of the great stories, if not perhaps the great sort of novel of the Torah. And in fact, scholars believe that the entire Joseph story was taken from probably Egyptian wisdom literature and just sort of almost dropped completely into the Torah text, with the main characters, of course, names changed in order to tie them to the ancient Israelites. The Torah, the particular section that we're doing this week has to do with toward the end, when Joseph eventually brings his father to Egypt. So there are 4 books of the Bible that this parsha encompasses. I'll just sort of summarize them very quickly for you. In Genesis 44, Judah approaches Joseph and delivers an impassioned plea. Remember, up to this point, that Benjamin has been sort of set up and by Joseph. He's sort of kind of tormenting his brothers who left him for dead. And he hasn't really forgiven them yet, and he's kind of keeping them twisting in the wind, as they said during Watergate. Judah then approaches Joseph, and he tells him the family's history. This is very ironic, as he tells him the story of his family, and talks about how much his father Jacob loved his youngest son Benjamin. Judah accepts responsibility for the situation that was created by the planted cup that Benjamin allegedly stole. He takes the blame for it, and he offers himself as a slave to Joseph in place of his brother. And this is really the turning point of the story, because up to now, you really don't know. We know, we've read it before, but if you were reading this as a novel, and by the way, it was a great adapted into a very famous novel by Thomas Mann, if you just sort of don't know what's going to happen next, this story's coming to a climax. And the turning point of the story is when Benjamin sort of takes responsibility, when Judah takes responsibility and offers himself instead of his younger brother. This demonstration of sort of moral transformation of the Judah and the other brothers who had been on the other side of the coin is having betrayed Joseph earlier is really, as I say, the sort of turning point of the story. Joseph then says, everybody go away, and he goes into the room in the palace. He's, of course, the prime minister, if you will, of the Pharaoh at this point. He runs the country, essentially. He's in the palace. He orders everybody out, including the servants, and he goes into a room, and he just starts sobbing so loudly the Torah says that they could hear. He's secreted in his own chamber somewhere, but he's so loud, his sobs, that everyone could hear. And he comes back out and reveals who he is to his brothers, which is just a kind of fantastic story, that this brother who they left for dead ends up being, literally the second most powerful person in Egypt. And if you're a political scientist like me, you know that the power behind the throne is really the most powerful person. That's not always true, probably not in our current administration, but has been true many times in the past. Joseph then reassures his brothers that, and this is the Egyptian wisdom literature piece, he reassures his brothers that it's not their fault what they did in leaving him for dead, because even though they were in the wrong and they harmed him, that was still part of God's plan. And that's really that whole sort of idea that everything happens according to what God desires to happen, all part of one great divine plan, is very much Egyptian. And it comes from this Egyptian wisdom literature. And it's called wisdom literature, by the way, because our task, if you will, or at least those who are wise, are the ones who can study, figure out like what that plan is. Like that's sort of the idea of Egyptian wisdom literature. Joseph then sends them back to the land of Canaan or Canaan with just a ridiculous amount of stuff. He just gives them all kinds of stuff and sends them back. And he invites the whole family to come to Egypt under his protection. That is Genesis 45. In the next chapter, Jacob, after he is he's sort of skeptical at first, but then he sees all this stuff. And so that sort of is some evidence that Joseph has money and power. He goes to Beersheba, and he prays to God, and he receives divine instruction or a divine message that this is that God will go with him to Egypt and then bring him back to the Holy Land. The chapter then records the migration of 70 in Jacob's household. There's a wonderful sort of discussion among the rabbis of where it says 69 in one place and 70 in another, and they finally decide that it's because one of them was born, because one was born in Egypt, and so it said that was 69 when they left and 70 when they got there. That's how they reconciled that. I like that. They are now in Egypt, of course, which is necessary for the whole story of Exodus to happen. Joseph then presents his family to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh is very taken with them. He gives them a bunch of land in Goshen and encourages, and then the famine hits in Egypt, but Joseph has prepared for that because of his dreams. He's socked away provisions and for the coming famine. And then when the country becomes entirely dependent then on the stores of grain that he has stored up. So I want to read you the end of this. Then Joseph brought in Jacob his father and set him before Pharaoh, and Jacob blessed Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to Jacob, "How many are the days of the years of your life?" And Jacob said to Pharaoh, "The days of the years of my sojourning are 130. Few and evil have been the days of the years of my life, and they have not attained to the days of the years of my fathers and the days of their sojourning." And Jacob blessed Pharaoh and went out from the presence of Pharaoh. Then Joseph settled his father and his brothers and gave them a possession in the land of Egypt, in the best of the land, in the land of Ramesses, as Pharaoh had commanded. And Joseph, this is the sentence I want to talk about, one of them, and Joseph provided his father, his brothers, and all his father's household with food according to the number of their dependents. So the ones who had more children, bigger families got more, and the ones who had fewer in the household got less. Now there was no food in the land, for the famine was very severe, so that the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan languished by reason of the famine. And Joseph gathered up all the money that was found in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan for the grain which they bought, and Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's house. So in other words, all the people had to effectively buy the grain. So think of it from a sort of taxation point of view. First, they were taxed in order to take the grain from them and put that in storage for not a rainy day, but for the famine. Then, when they needed it back, they had no more grain to eat, then the government sold it back to them if they provided silver or money. Same word in Hebrew, so it's not clear, but they had to give up their money in order to get that back. And then they ran out of money, and so Joseph says, well, then bring me your cattle. And they bring the cattle, and he gives them grain. Then they run out of cattle, and he says, well, then you're going to have to give your grain and yourselves. And they become, effectively, the government now owns the land, and they are effectively serfs living on the land. And by the way, when the famine gets better, they have to pay for 1/5 of whatever they produce on this land in taxes again. So this is kind of the story, the part of the story that I want to talk about a little bit. So first of all, there are two problems here. One of them is that it seems like Joseph gave his family all this food, all this stuff. And then on behalf of the government, he didn't steal the money, as the rabbis are quick to point out. He collected it and made Pharaoh rich. So he was, effectively, the government was kind of corrupt, right? And he's using this famine, where we think of it as a positive thing, that he planned ahead and he saved all this food, and then when there was a famine, he was able to distribute it, but he didn't distribute it for free. He distributed it only by taking everything that the people had, and then when they had nothing left, he enslaved them, effectively as serfs working for Pharaoh. So that's one problem. Then becomes, did he favor his own family over other people? And the second issue is what kind of model of government is this, if you're effectively taking everything from the people. Now, the ancient rabbis didn't seem very unhappy with any of this, because it was probably pretty typical behavior for governments at that time, as well as governments in some cases since. But it's interesting because the medieval rabbis seem a little bit more sensitive to it. Of course, there's lots of anti-Semitism in medieval times. And so Nachmanides is very quick to point out that when it says that the money was distributed to the food was distributed to the family according to literally the mouths of the children, that is, according to the number of children they had, Nachmanides interprets this in the Middle Ages as that the distribution was according to the law of the land. In other words, it was fair. He didn't give his own family any more than he gave anybody else. And that's not what it says, right? It says very clearly they just got stuff. It didn't say anything about the law of the land, whereas the Egyptians had to buy it back, because it was theirs to begin with. But Nachmanides sort of makes that kind of distinction. And the modern rabbis, that is the 20th century rabbis at least, looked on this and they were kind of embarrassed by it, because it doesn't look like the way we think fair governments ought to behave, or fair people ought to behave. And so they tried to defend it by saying it was actually a fairer process, a fairer taxation system than in other countries at the time. And then they found an Egyptian stele from around 1200, which seems to contradict that and say this was actually worse than the behavior of another pharaoh who was in the same situation. I want to close by just pointing out one connection. I can't help it, being a political scientist. But Benjamin Franklin, in 1787, said to the Constitutional Convention, quote, "There is scarce a king in 100 who would not, if he could, follow the example of Pharaoh, get first all the people's money, then their lands, and then make them and their children servants forever." And indeed, the revolutionary generation from the mid-1760s up through the constitutional period frequently alluded to this story, and to Pharaoh in particular, the Exodus story that comes afterward, as the epitome of the tyrannical king. And they like to make the analogy between Pharaoh and King George III, particularly in New England, because the New Englanders, having come over the ocean for religious freedom, tended to regard themselves as the new Israelites, as the chosen people, and likened their story of leaving Europe to the story of Exodus. And so a preacher in 1775, just for example, I mean, there are literally dozens or more of these examples. The King of Great Britain, he told his congregation, has acted the part of Pharaoh and hardened his heart against the cries of his oppressed subjects until the judgment of heaven is ready to fall upon him. When a people are enslaved and rulers will not let them go, God has ever appeared for their deliverance. It is even the case that there were political cartoons that showed, they used the phrase, "let my people go," which of course would resonate pretty clearly. Now, it's another example of how this generation was able to effectively ignore that they were slave owners too, or at least that they were profiting from the slave trade if they weren't literal owners of the slaves. And that much of the system, much of the prosperity of both the North and the South was based on the slave system. But that ability to compartmentalize, even among the Jews, particularly later in the antebellum period, was still strikes me as kind of remarkable. The temple in Charleston, for example, which dates to the 1840s, was built by slaves because that was the construction crew. And they knew it, and yet they rarely did they sort of try to reconcile those ideas. So just some thoughts on this parsha. Shabbat Shalom.
Olam on page 40. Again, we're skipping all the prayers that require a minyan. Ahavat olam Beit Yisrael Chavta Torah u'mitzvot, chukim u'mishpatim, utanu lemadeta. Aken Adonai Eloheinu, b'shachleinu u'v'kumeinu, nasiach b'chukacha, v'nismach b'divrei Toratecha, ובמצוותיך לעולם ועד. כי הם חיינו ויארך ימינו, ויארך ימינו, ובהם נגד יומם ולילה, יומם ולילה. ואהבתך אל תסיר ממני עולמים, ברוך אתה אדוני, אוהב עמו ישראל. Turn the page for the Shema. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם בבניך ודיברת בם, בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם להיות בידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובישעריך. Let's turn to page 46 for the Shomru and please rise. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, לעשות את השבת לתורתם ברית עולם, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לתורתם ברית עולם. ובני בני ישראל עד חיל העולם, עד חיל העולם, אותי לעולם, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לתורתם ברית עולם. כי 6 ימים עשה אדוני, את השמיים ואת הארץ, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורתם ברית עולם. וביום תצגי שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, שבת וינפש, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת, לעשות את השבת לדורתם ברית עולם. And we'll continue with the Amida, which is from page 47 to page 51. This is the silent Amida, which is when Rabbi Cohen says you are free to pursue your own thoughts rather than the words on the page. And please feel free to be seated when you are done. Please feel free to continue. Shalom Ava Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Ava Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Ki atahu melech adon Lecha Hashalom, Ki Atahim Melech Adon, Lecha Hashalom, Shalom Ava Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rava Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam Tasim Leolam Tasim Leolam. And now we skip to our Mishaberach, our prayer for the sick among our congregation and those dear to us. We use the Debbie Friedman, thank you, Melody, and her words, which are on page 173. Thank you. 173. Yeah, would you?
So as we pray for healing, we keep in our thoughts and prayers Shulamit Bat Gittel, Marjorie Morstein, Barbara Feingold, Harriet Siegel, Nadine Hyman, Gary Kramer, Francis Haber, Suzanne Gott, Joan Klepp, Yisrael Batzipora, Susan Olar, Megan Cogno, Natalie Kogan, Bernie Rowe, Devorah Bat Avraham Basara, Esther Weiner, Hannah Lipman, Peter Jacobson, Elizabeth Allen, Joel Lowenstein, Bonnie Carlton, Rivka Markowitz, Victor Alfieri, Arlene Hoffman, Bruce Fine, Rosa Burgos, Don Siegel, and Chaim Tovia Ben David Rachel. That is Jeffrey Siegel, Rabbi's husband's father, who's very ill in Florida.
And also Adira Bativora, and anybody else who has someone's name to add to the list, please let us know. Linda? Lisa? Tamar? May they all be blessed with healing. Page 173, top left. Mishaberach Avotenu Mikor HaBracha Le'imotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Mishaberach Imotenu Mikor HaBracha Avotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. Bless those we've named, bless those who have no one to say their name, and all their caregivers and healers. Please rise for Aleinu, which is found on page 56.
Can you do it, Lena?
Yeah. Please be seated. And we have no one who is in need of saying Kaddish. Yeah, we should be, but I don't see him. Oh. Those yard types our congregation observes this week are Minnie Meyerowitz, Joseph Knopfman, Robert Alexander, Morton Isaacs, Morris Glickman, Muriel Carrell, Ethel Eisman, Jenny Bloom, Casper Robinson, and Annie Switzer. Are there any names I failed to mention?
I know his name was announced last week, but my father's yard site was last night and up through sundown today. So just unofficially mentioned Joe Lasser. I did.
All right. I was going to do a journal to Greensleeves. Does anybody mind? No? All right. A journal we found on page 62. Oh, I forgot. Announcements? Do we have announcements? We have announcements and an announcer.
Announcements. A terrible death to die. A terrible death to die. I don't know the rest of the song.
I don't know
But they used to do
that
that
one.
at camp. So, where's my announcement page?
Good question.
Read the email. There's your announcements.
Here you go.
All right. Announcements and updates. Religious school is on winter break until Sunday. Sorry, parents. School will begin at 9 a.m. on January 11th. Torah begins at 10:15. Sunday mornings, that's pajamas optional. Sisterhood gift wrapping at Haywood Mall is coming to a close. Don't forget to sign up for this year's Southern Schmooze. So, we've been doing this now, what, 5, 6 years? Not that long? It seems longer. Anyway, sometime in February, this time it's the last weekend in February, small Southern congregations get together at the local Jewish camp in Clayton, Georgia. Gorgeous, amazing food, fun, entertainment, discussions, Chattanooga, I can't remember, who else comes, David? Birmingham comes. It's so wonderful. Please come. I don't think Charleston has ever come. Okay, anyway, come. It's amazing. It's wonderful. It's nice to be a majority and not a minority. For those of us who haven't been to Israel recently. Anyway, Southern Schmooze, February 27th to March 1st. Celebrate Shabbat with other other people from small congregations and us. If you need more info or financial aid, contact the rabbi. Join the Social Action Committee for a mitzvah. Volunteers, never mind. Okay. Join the Social Action Committee, Meals on Wheels mitzvah, Tuesday, January 20th, 7:45 a.m. Pajamas optional. Meals on Wheels Greenville. We will help assemble meals to be delivered. So please contact Jeff Gaines or Allison Duckworth. Come back to CBI for Age to Perfection, Ageless Grace. On Thursday the 8th at 11 a.m., exercise for the body and brain, light lunch, $5 payable at the door. Sisterhood Shabbat. Be there or be square. Saturday the 10th, more information in the bulletin's email. The queen of the Shabbat, she does an amazing job. Intermediate Hebrew with Fred Leffert on Sundays at 9:30. This Sunday, no Megillah class with Rabbi, and then Torah study class Tuesdays at 5:30 with Fred Leffert via Zoom. See the website. And then happy anniversary on the 22nd. What day is it today?
The 26th.
Michael and Sharon Bookbinder. And then the 23rd was Lance and Amanda Armstrong. And then we had birthdays. Happy birthday. This is not the most updated, because I know people coming up are having birthdays. But anyway, that's the news. If you want more and up to date, check the website.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tamar. All right. Oh, I think I told everybody the wrong page number. The page number is actually 211. Sorry, everybody. For our final hymn of the evening, we will all be on the same page. 211. Olam asher malach b'terem kol yitzir nivra ve'et nasa b'chefzo kol azar melech shemo nikra ve'acharei kibrot hakol levado yimloch Noah. Laham Shalom.
Sue Havli Be'etzara Ve'huni Simanusli Not Kasudi Be'ya Mekra Be'yadav Kirufi Be'eti Sham Be'aira Be'imruchi Geviyati Adonai Elohim.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Thank you for being here.
Shabbat Shalom. And we'll be doing, hopefully it'll scare you off, because we'll be doing services again next Friday night. This time we'll know what we're doing a little bit better, but hopefully we'll have a minyan. After people sleep off the New Year's festivities. But it's not the second, it's the third. Yeah, it's the second. What? I don't know. It doesn't look like it. There is a kiddush.
they not put a tray out?
Sorry, what?
They didn't put a tray out.
Oh, I'm sorry, still didn't catch that. I'm gonna get hearing aid.
I've got one. They didn't put a tray out.
Oh. They're trick candles.
They are. Okay. Just because I don't think they usually do. I think they let them burn, but
I think so too,
I
but
don't know why they didn't leave out the tray.
I don't know what wall I was.
I'm going to put this folder back together. No. I'm going to leave it on, Linda. I'm not sure how to do that. And they may leave it on anyway, you know? Okay, so this is also for next week. Yeah, I'm afraid you're stuck with us again. I'm afraid you're stuck with us one more time.
I caught that actually. And no, we're not.
Did you, do you find that the one that you're most likely to say, what to is Tom? Because Bill and me, he's basically the reason